Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler video for Magic the Gathering's Final Fantasy expansion, and we have a ton of spoilers to get through today. Yesterday, I didn't think we had too many, so I decided to save them up and do 2 days in one video with this video. And now, in hindsight, I think that might have been a mistake because we actually got a ton of spoilers between yesterday and today, and we're going to cover all of them in this video, and we have a lot to get to, so we're going to get right to it. Please like the video, it helps me get it out to more people, helps the channel grow. I appreciate that stuff more than I can possibly express with words right now, and subscribe if you're new because I have a ton of crazy content on the way, lots of spoiler content, and some ridiculous deck techs that you haven't seen yet, and I'm excited about. But let's dive in here. First off, we've got Sharlayan Nation of Scholars. And this is the first of a cycle. I shouldn't say the first of a cycle, but the first of the rest of the cycle that was spoiled over the last couple days. We got the entire cycle, at least the ones that we were missing, I'm pretty sure, over the last couple of days. These are the common dual lands that enter tapped. They give you one of two different colors, but the bonus to these lands is that they all count as towns, and they represent very legendary towns within the Final Fantasy games, which is really cool. This one in particular being from Final Fantasy XIV. If you know, you know. The next one here is Vector Imperial Capital, which is the Rakdos colored dual land, and it comes from Final Fantasy VI. We've also got Windurst Federation Center, Selesnya dual land from Final Fantasy XI, I'm pretty sure. And then we've got Trino Dark City from Final Fantasy IX. We've got Insomnia Crown City from Final Fantasy XV. We've got Baron Airship Kingdom from Final Fantasy IV. Love that one. And then we've got Gone Town of Ruin from Final Fantasy V. Honestly, all of these lands are super flavorful, and I love to see it, and I'm even more excited to just figure out how deep the town synergies go, and how valuable these might end up being. At the very least, I think they're going to be really, really good in draft. We also have Guado-Salam Farplane Gateway from Final Fantasy X, if you know, you know. And Gungaga Reactor Town. That's a deep cut from Final Fantasy VII. But moving on, we've got World Map, an artifact for 1 colorless mana. You can pay 1, tap it, sack it, search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Alternatively, if you don't need the basic land, you can pay 3, tap and sack it to search your library for any land, reveal it, put it to your hand, and then shuffle. So you can actually use the world map to find towns. More importantly, you can use it to find broken lands, such as the new adventure lands that have adventures attached to them. Those might not be broken, but I do think they're going to end up being powerful. But there are definitely broken lands from Magic's history, especially in older formats, that you can fetch with something like this, Field of the Dead. And because of that, it is possible that a card like this sees some play in older formats. I'm curious to know what you think about that, and if you think this card could potentially be busted in decks like that in older formats, because I think the potential's there, but in Standard, I don't think this quite makes the cut. I don't think there are any lands that are good enough to bother with this, but in Limited, it's going to be really, really good at helping you to color fix, making sure that you can play the colors that you want to play, multiple colors, potentially even 3 colors within your Limited deck. But next up, we've got Slash of Light, an instant for 1 white and 1. And it deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control plus the number of equipment you control to target creature. This is actually from the very first Final Fantasy game, which is pretty cool. And I actually think it's going to be super relevant. This might even see play in Constructed because we know equipment decks are going to be pretty relevant moving forward. At least I would hope they are, because we have synergies coming out the wazoo for equipment in this set. At the very least, this is going to be really, really good in Limited, right? Nice instant speed removal. And what makes this especially good in Limited and potentially also in Standard is the fact that we have all of those new equipments coming that have the job select mechanic that make a creature token when you play them. So just by playing one of those cheap weapons that has a job select, you're getting 2 permanents onto the battlefield that both count towards this Slash of Light. So I could see a lot worse than building an equipment-based deck that mostly uses these job select equipments that make creatures when they enter. And then Slash of Light can do a lot of damage relatively early in the game. And even if they kill off all your creatures with like a board wipe or whatever, you still have a bunch of equipment left over that you can still get value out of, and you can still get damage out of the Slash of Light, which is what kind of makes it a little different than cards like this that we've seen in the past that only count your creatures. Even if they wipe your board, you've still got those equipment left behind, and even if you can't equip them right away, you don't have any bodies or whatever, you can still use your removal, drag out the game a little bit, take out their threats, and get to a point where you start getting bodies again to start rebuilding. So I think a card like this is pretty darn good. I think it's going to see play in multiple formats for sure. I really think equipment's coming back in a big way. But next up, we've got Vane's Treachery, an instant for 1 black and 1. Has kicker, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, but if it was kicked, that creature gets -6/-6 until end of turn instead. I actually really like this card, especially as a common. We've seen a lot of sacrifice and aristocrat style synergies in this set, so the fact that they're going as deep as this with even just commons, with things that will enable those sorts of strategies. Sometimes you don't even care about the -6/-6 over the -2/-2. Sometimes you might still only kill like a 2 toughness thing, but still want the ability to sacrifice something to trigger all of your sacrifice payoffs, your synergies or whatnot. And so this is relevant in multiple ways. The fact that you can play it as removal even if you don't sack something. The fact that you can sack something whether or not you're in an aristocrat style deck, but if you are in one of those sacrifice style decks, it's even better. And then the fact that you can just kill something really, really big, even in a deck that's not necessarily a sacrifice deck, by sacrificing something maybe you don't want to get rid of, but it still ends up being worth it to get rid of their big bomby things. So just a lot of versatility with this card. And that's actually really good for an instant, I think, or rather for a common. I clearly need more coffee. Why did I say instant when I was thinking of common? I don't know. I need more sleep, I guess. Next up, we've got Weapons Vendor, a 2/2 human artificer for 1 white and 3. When he enters, you draw a card, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control an equipment, you can pay 1 colorless mana to attach target equipment you control to target creature you control. Now, this is the kind of card we really need to enable equipment decks in Limited. I think it's probably too expensive for Constructed. 4 is a lot. It does draw a card to replace itself, which is nice. And you can pay just 1 mana regardless of how big and busted the equipment is to just attach it to any creature you want. But 4 mana is 4 mana, so I think in Constructed it's probably just too expensive. It's just too slow. You could just dump that 4 mana into actually paying the equip cost. But in Limited, I actually think this card is nuts. I think this card is going to be one of the premier commons for Sealed and Draft that you're going to want to just grab up right away, because I think equipment's going to be huge, and the fact that he replaces himself by drawing a card, those types of creatures have historically been really, really good in Limited formats, because you're replacing it with another card that it's kind of like free value in a way. It slows you down tempo-wise, but as far as pound for pound card value, being able to replace itself with a card draw and then just keep digging through your deck and keep going and have another body on the field is pretty good. And since there's so many equipment synergies in this set too, this guy's even better than he otherwise would be. I think he's going to be hugely relevant. But next up, we've got 𝑇𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒 Merchant. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. I didn't make it far enough into Final Fantasy XI to know for sure. I played that game when it first came out, which is funny because I had a really crappy PC and it couldn't really run. It didn't even pass the benchmark, but I still got the game anyway because I was like super excited about it. And I played it a little bit, but I really shouldn't have been even trying to play that game. I think I used my parents' old PC, like a Dell or something. This was a long time ago, guys. This was when MMOs were kind of new. Anyway, this 𝑇𝑒𝑒𝑟𝑟𝑎𝑛𝑐𝑒 Merchant is a 1/4 Beast Citizen for 1 blue and 2. you have pay 1 mana, tap it, draw a card, discard a card. You can also pay 7 mana, tap it, sack this creature, draw 3 cards, and the ability costs 1 less to activate for each town you control. This is the first really, really good payoff that we've seen for towns. And he's going to be an absolute backbone piece of a town deck in Limited, 100%. I definitely see a world where you can draft all of the towns up and run a few 𝐴 merchants and just go completely ham with card draw. The fact that you could potentially draw 3 cards for only like 3 mana if you have 4 towns out, or 2 mana if you have 5 towns out, it just gets really, really crazy as you go on. We're obviously going to need a lot more payoffs for towns than just drawing out of this guy, but he is a core reason and a core payoff for going that archetype in Limited, 100%. And the fact that he can just loot as well if you're not at the point where you want to get that value is really good too. And he works as a pretty decent blocker early in the game, stops aggro. This is just really good for a common. I'm going to be completely honest. Obviously, it's not super good if you're not drafting into towns heavily, but I think even just the normal draft archetypes are all going to utilize those towns to a certain extent as your color fixers. So even if you just get like 1 or 2 mana off on this ability, having a good blocker that can loot early, that eventually later on, even if it costs you a ton of mana, can just draw you 3 cards, is still good, even if you're not deep into towns. So I do think this is probably going to end up being one of the best commons in the set, particularly good if you're drafting into towns. And it is possible that this sees play in Standard if the town deck in Standard is real. We're going to need a lot better payoffs for it to be powerful enough for Standard, but if it's powerful enough with other cards, and that deck's going to exist regardless of the merchant, I think you definitely do add the merchant into that deck. I think if you ramp out towns correctly, it would be really easy to just sack this for no mana at all and draw 3 cards. In the mid game, relatively early in the game. Not super early, but early enough that it's absolutely going to matter if you're ramping out towns effectively. So, I don't know. I hope that deck exists. I hope it's a thing. I think that could be super fun in Standard. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if there are other cards that maybe you've seen that might play into that strategy, because I think it's pretty interesting. But next up, we've got Lionheart, a 4-cost artifact equipment that equips for 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+1, but what makes it so good is that when it enters, it deals 2 damage to any target. I love the flavor here, the Gunblade from Final Fantasy VIII, and the fact that it not only buffs your dude, but also does direct damage to another target, kind of simulating the pulling the trigger and firing off the shot from the Gunblade, which is really interesting. I kind of wished that the Gunblade would be a little bit better and maybe be able to have like repeated uses of doing direct damage or something, but that's probably being selfish. This is just an uncommon, right? And I think for an uncommon, this is going to be really, really good in Limited. I don't think this is going to make the cut in Constructed. 4 mana is just too much. If it was 3, maybe, but you're competing with things like the Chainsaw, which is just infinitely superior to this. The one upside to Lionheart is the fact that it doesn't require any colored mana whatsoever, and if you had things that reduce the cost of your cards by 1 colorless, you could potentially get this to a point where you play it for 0 mana. We've seen decks in Standard recently that have ways of giving multiple cost reductions to cards to the point where you get like Ugin out for 0 mana. You don't have to pay any mana to play him, stuff like that. But even then, if you're jumping through all those hoops to make this 0 cost, aren't there just better cards to play, to jump through all those hoops to play, than just like this thing that deals 2 damage to a target and gives you a not that great equipment afterwards? Probably. So I'm going down a hole here, but I'm going to circle this back around and just say that this is going to be really good in Limited. It's removal that also gives you board presence for the remainder of the game. That's always going to be good, even if it's overcosted. It's just not going to make the cut in Standard. But next up, we've got Crystal Fragments. This card actually looks really awesome. 1 white mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, and it equips for just 1 colorless. So nothing crazy to write home about, but it is a very, very cheap equipment that can trigger all of your equipment synergies for stupid cheap and be able to equip to creature after creature after creature for stupid cheap kind of gives me flashbacks to Skull Clamp. Not that it's anywhere near as powerful as that, but just the fact that it's super cheap to equip. But the kicker here is you pay 2 white and 5, exile the equipment, return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. You can only do it as a sorcery. It comes back as Summon Alexander. That's right, so Alexander starts as an equipment, which kind of makes sense within the lore of Final Fantasy IX, which is the version of Alexander they're using here. A 4/3 flyer on chapter... You calm down. Jeez. Dogs don't like me looking at Alexander, I guess. A 4/3 flyer. On Chapter 1 and 2, you prevent all damage that would be dealt to creatures you control this turn. And then on Chapter 3, you tap all creatures your opponents control. The one thing that kind of bums me out about this card is that the Chapter 1 and 2 triggers only happen on your turn. So they can only prevent damage to your creatures in a situation where you're on the offensive, where you're attacking, not necessarily where you're defending with them. I really wish there would have been a, like, maybe one of them prevented damage that would be dealt to creatures you control this turn, but then the other trigger was, like, until your next turn it does it. I wish there was an opportunity to use this defensively. That's really my only bummer, my only downside that I can see to this card that bums me out about it. But even other than that, the fact that it's a 4/3 flyer, none of your creatures are taking damage for 2 turns while you're swinging in, and then on Chapter 3... yeah, your opponents can take, your creatures can take damage from your opponents, but you tap down all of their creatures so that they can't block. So this is just really good as an aggressive sort of win condition, at least in Limited, where you just get it out early as the crystal fragments. It gets you a little bit of value, but eventually when you have a ton of mana and you're out of gas, you don't have anything better to do with it, you just flip it, and you get 2 or 3 turns of just going ham on your opponent to close out the game. You could do a lot worse than that. The one thing I do want to point out about this is the fact that the way summons work, you're only really going to get 1 attack with this, right? You exile it, correct? Yes, exile it and then return it transformed. So the first turn it comes back, you can use it as a blocker, but you're not going to be able to swing with it. On Chapter 2, that's the turn that you'll be able to swing with it. And then on Chapter 3, it gets sacrificed when you tap all your opponent's creatures down. So you won't be able to swing with it that turn. So you'll only really get 1 swing with Alexander. But still, you'll get 3 attacks where the first 2 your creatures can swing through without taking any damage whatsoever in combat. And then on Chapter 3, you tap everything down so that you can Alpha Strike for the win. And that's just really good at the top end. It's expensive. But again, you're not, this card isn't useless while you're waiting to get there. It's a cheap, efficient equipment that's going to work with all of your equipment synergies. So I actually think this card's really, really good. I don't think it's like insane because it can't help you be defensive. You're forced to be aggressive. But then again, the 4/3 body can technically be used as a blocker defensively for a couple turns when you flip it. But is that alone worth 7 mana? Not really. So you definitely want to get your value out of this card when you flip it by having a bunch of creatures out, being able to swing 3 turns in a row. And you have to definitely set up that board state just right. So it reminds me of one of those cards that you'd use to just buff up your whole team for an Alpha Strike later in the game that you usually only add like 1 copy of in draft. And I kind of see it functioning the same way. The big difference is it costs a lot more, but it's not completely useless while you're waiting to get there because you have the equipment. Next up, we've got Aether, an artifact for 1 blue and 3. Tap it, exile it, add 1 blue mana. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, you copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Restores 20 MP. I love this. Flavor Flea, I sort of wish it was a little bit different. I wish that... I almost wish that it was like the next spell you cast, you get the mana back or something that you spent to cast it. I wish they went a little bit of a different direction with it as far as the flavor to sort of symbolize, you know, getting more MP to cast more spells with. So like getting your mana back, or like the next spell you cast, it goes back to your hand instead of the graveyard. Maybe both, like stuff like that. But maybe that'd be too busted. But if we set that aside, the next flavor in line that I think would work good for this card is the one they went with, right? Copying something and also giving you a little bit of mana in order to, you know, cast the spell to begin with. The mana sort of representative of giving you MP, and then the copy representative of the fact that you're getting that many more casts out of your MP pool, if that makes sense. But functionally, set all the flavor aside for now. Just functionally, I think this card's actually kind of crazy. Like, actually kind of crazy, right? You play this on turn 4, or maybe turn 3 with, like, a Llanowar Elf or some other ramp card earlier in the game. And then, like, on turn 4 or 5, you've got 5 mana, plus tap this for a mana, 6 mana. You can literally do a double 6-drop spell on, like, turn 5 or turn 4 if you ramp this out with, like, a Llanowar Elf. That seems awesome. That seems really, really, really good. Like, really, really crazy. The fact that this ramps you 1 mana in the process means you can get that much more of a powerful spell out of it than you otherwise would be able to, and is actually a huge, huge part of the power level of this card. It might look super incidental, only being 1 mana, but that 1 mana kind of functions like 2 mana because you're getting an extra mana to cast an even more expensive spell, which means the copy that you get is also the even more expensive spell, and it just sort of exponentially increases how much value you can get out of the ether. I love it, man. I don't know what we're going to brew with this, but we're absolutely going to brew something with this. What are the best sorceries? Specifically, I think 6-drop sorceries are going to work best with this. What are the best instants and sorceries that we can cast for 6 that getting 2 of at the same time would be absolutely disgusting? Let me know in the comments, because we are absolutely going to do it. This card's nuts. But next up, we've got Magitech Armor, a 4/4 artifact vehicle for 1 white and 3. When it enters, you create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, and it crews for just 1. I actually like this card a lot. This is going to be really good in Limited. A 4/4 vehicle that only crews for 1 is already kind of good. The fact that it makes a token that can crew it already is also really good. It kind of just feels like a 4/4 that doesn't even need to be crewed, except if they kill it, you have a 1/1 left behind, which to me is really good for an uncommon for a 4-drop. But then it gets even crazier when you start to consider the fact that you're getting 2 permanents into play, that might matter in some kind of like a Sacrificer Aristocrat style deck. You're getting this 1/1 creature, this colorless hero creature token that you can attach equipment to, and equipment's huge in this set. So just a 1/1 body is better in a set like this than it would be in other sets, because there's just so many equipment, so many ways to augment it. So the value of that 1/1 goes up. There's just so many little incidental ways in which this card is really good. I actually think like it's going to be pretty nuts and Limited, I think. I think it's going to be a staple. I think people are going to try to grab this as early as they can in drafts and run it. I mean, it's not necessarily like a pack one, pick one. It's nothing crazy like that, but it's just really good value that you absolutely want to include in your deck, especially if you're running like equipment or vehicles or whatnot. Next up, we've got Clash of the Icons. This uncommon has me questioning Wizards of the Coast's sanity. This is just 1 green mana for a sorcery. Choose 1 or more. Let me reiterate, choose 1 or more. Target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls, and it has 2 other abilities. So for 1 mana, you get a fight spell that can do 2 other things. It doesn't even matter what those things are right now. It's choose 1 or more. If you could just choose 1 of these 3 abilities and 1 of them was a fight spell for 1 mana, that would be awesome. The fact that you can choose all 3 of them if you want is kind of bananas. Now let's see what those abilities are, shall we? The second ability is remove a lore counter from target saga you control. And then the third ability is put a lore counter on target saga you control. So as long as you have a saga out, this card reads, at the very least, one of your creatures fights one of their creatures and kills it, and re-trigger the last lore ability that you triggered on your saga. Because you could both remove the lore counter and put a lore counter on. and it resolves in the order it's listed on the card. So you'll remove a lore counter first, and then you'll add one. That just seems crazy? That seems utterly crazy. I don't know what Wizards is thinking, but some kind of Saga deck with... Any Saga deck in Standard is going to include 4 copies of this. This is broken. This is so good. And then we haven't even talked about the fact that you can split those targets, right? So if you just want to remove a lore counter from one of your things so that it gets to stick around for another turn and doesn't go away just yet, maybe it's a huge creature like Bahamut or something, you're not ready for it to sacrifice itself and reach the end of its lore counters, you just remove a lore counter from that. But maybe you just played... I don't know, like an Odin or something, and you want to just hurry up and get to the point where you can attack in and just auto-kill them, you could just add a lore counter to that. So the fact that you could trigger any next Saga ability, also move any one Saga back one lore counter, also potentially just choose the same Saga for both abilities, so that it's like, you lose one, get one, and it's almost like your lore counters just stayed the same, but you just re-trigger the last ability. Like, all of those things and all of the versatility and all of the different ways that you can line up using this on multiple different sagas at the same time, it's just crazy, man. The fact that you get to fight something for 1 mana and then potentially get all of that value is just nuts. I am absolutely going to build this deck. I'm probably going to build multiple decks. We're probably going to build a deck that centers on fight spells. We're probably going to build a deck that centers on sagas. Like, we're going to go so deep into different ways to use this card because it's just nuts. If you guys don't know, sagas are my favorite card type anyway. And now the fact that the summons are saga creatures, when I first found that out, I was just... my mind was blown. That is so perfect. The flavor is so spot on for Final Fantasy. I absolutely adore it. The fact that my favorite card type now got turned into a new favorite card type from my favorite part of some of my favorite games is just blowing me away. So this card, bananas. If you see it, you draft it right away. You do not let it go. It is definitely a pack one, pick one. 100%. If there was ever a common or uncommon in this entire set that is a pack one, pick one, it is Clash of the Icons. This card is bananas. It is pineapples. It is lots of other fruit that I don't know, but I'm going to move on because I could just stay here forever talking about this card. I just think it's nuts. But let me know in the comments what you want to do with this card, because there's just so many possibilities. There are just so many possibilities. Next up, we've got Snow Villiers, a star power 3 toughness legendary human rebel monk for 1 white and 2. He has vigilance, and his power is equal to the number of creatures you control. Pretty cool representation of Snow. Not anything super good, but he'll be really nice in limited decks for sure. The fact that his power scales, the fact that we have equipment in this set that create creature tokens, it's a lot easier to go wider with tokens and with just smaller creatures because of that. So this guy's going to be a little bit better than he otherwise would be in maybe other sets. There's potential for this guy to have huge power, and the vigilance absolutely matters, especially in limited. I think it's really cool. I kind of wish there was a more interesting version of Snow, but at the same time, if there was any character that they made kind of boring and vanilla versions of, I guess it would make sense for Snow, because I think he's probably the most vanilla character we've gotten in a Final Fantasy game. Let me know if I'm wrong about that, but I feel like, I remember when that game first came out, Final Fantasy 13, and everyone kind of thought he was just like normal generic dude guy. But I don't know, I could be wrong. I didn't finish that game. I played it for like 30 hours, and then I was sick of running down a hallway. I should probably go back and finish it though. I probably should. People tell me the story's good, and the 2 sequels supposedly got a lot better, and I've always had it in the back of my head that maybe I should just finish that game and then play the sequels, because I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy the sequels, especially with Chrono Trigger being my favorite game, and I hear that the second game, Final Fantasy 13, what was it called? Part 2? Oh, I forget, there was a name to it. I forget the actual name of it, but Final Fantasy 13 Part 2 had a lot of like time travel shenanigans, stuff that was kind of similar to Chrono Trigger. So I've always kind of wanted to to play that game, but not finishing the first one. I always wanted to finish the first one before I play it, and then all of that is just way too much time to consume to not do Magic content instead. So I'm here recording a video for you instead of playing that game. But anyway, I did have some fun with that game when it first came out, but I'm going off on a tangent. Clearly, I need more coffee and more sleep. That's my problem. I am so scatterbrained today. But let me know in the comments if Snow is the most generic Final Fantasy character of all time. Next up, we've got Stolen Uniform, an instant for 1 blue mana. Choose target creature you control and target equipment. Gain control of that equipment until end of turn. Attach it to the chosen creature. When you lose control of that equipment this turn, if it's attached to a creature you control, unattach it. So it's a threaten for an equipment. You literally only steal the equipment, it automatically becomes attached, and at end of turn they get it back. And it gets unattached, obviously. Makes sense that you would have that be the extra. That's interesting. I have a feeling this could be really, really good. This is one of those like high risk, high reward cards where like if you're playing with this in draft and you come up against an opponent just doesn't really have good equipment, it's 100% wasted. But it's probably a really good sideboard card in there, right? Yeah, I think there's potential for this to be nuts. The fact that it's just 1 mana at instant speed and there's so many really good equipment in this set, I think this is made to be the ultimate sideboard card for Limited. That's how I feel. I don't know if it's good enough for... I mean, I guess it depends on how crazy equipment decks get in Standard, right? If it becomes like a tier 1 meta, some equipment decks are really nuts, and there are a couple equipment that are specifically really, really good on their own and can just like close out the game. Taking it from them and using it against them could be super relevant. So maybe it makes the sideboard, maybe it makes the cut in sideboards in Standard too. This is a perfect example of a card that you can't really know how important it is until the entire set is released, until you start playing with it, because it is so dependent on the meta, right? 100%. But the fact that it's just a 1 mana instant that can potentially completely blow out your opponent in the right circumstances means you absolutely want to consider this card in the back of your head for sure. But next up, we've got Garnet, Princess of Alexandria, a 2/2 legendary human noble cleric with lifelink for 2 mana in the colors of Selesnya. Whenever she attacks, you can remove a lore counter from each of any number of sagas you control and put a +1/+1 counter on Garnet for each lore counter removed this way. I love it. The flavor is perfect with the fact that you have the summons with the lore counters, but even outside of that, she's really, really good with normal sagas, just removing lore counters from everything. You basically just get to keep your sagas around forever, as long as you keep attacking with Garnet, and she just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and she has lifelink, and she's legendary. I feel like she'd pair up with Aerith really well, because Aerith also has lifelink, gets counters when you gain life, and when she dies can put her counters on all of your legendaries, which would be Garnet, which makes it so that she's able to swing in more effectively without dying because she has more counters, so that you can keep taking lore counters off sagas. I could see this going somewhere. But I could also see just a very saga heavy deck, a very summon heavy deck, just running Garnet as a way to just keep your summons around forever. That could be super fun as well. I think she's going to be like one of those backbone cards in Limited that an entire archetype is built around. And you're gonna wanna definitely draft her super high if you're trying to go that direction. It'll be super fun. I think this set's gonna be really, really fun to play in Limited. I wouldn't be surprised if this makes the cut in Constructed as well. Standard, I think, has room for a summon deck or a saga deck. And even if it didn't, even if it just played like a life gain deck, maybe, that ran some sagas, you don't necessarily need to go insanely deep in sagas for her to be worth running, I don't think. Although she gets even better the more you have, right? So, I don't know. We're going to have a lot to test out during Early Access and beyond. I'm excited about that. If you guys are excited about that, let me know in the comments. I will be doing a 24-hour stream during Early Access, and I have more information coming about that. It's going to be wild. But next up, we've got Locke Cole from Final Fantasy VI. My boy Locke. A 2/3 legendary human rogue for 3 mana in the colors of Dimir. He has Death Touch, he has Lifelink, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you get to loot, draw a card, and then discard a card. Everything about this is awesome. I mean, I think I don't know if he's quite good enough for Constructed, for Standard. I think the power level of Standard is just so pushed, power creep is so insane, that I don't know. But I think he at least has a chance. Because he has both keywords and he gets to make you loot and things like that, I think he has a chance. But I think where he's going to be really effective is definitely in Limited. Like, this is just, like, insane in Limited. You absolutely want this guy. The fact that it's just a 2/3 Death Touch Lifelinker. Lifelink matters in Limited so much more than most people realize. It's way more important in Limited than it is in Constructed most of the time. And it just helps win the race. It helps with tempo so much. Doubling the difference between your life total and their life total on attacks can make all the difference in the world. So having a lifelinker like that where they don't want to block it, they don't want to lose their big guy that's going to be able to, you know, kill Cole in the process, but they don't want to let it through because, again, you're just increasing your life total and getting the tempo advantage that way. It's just a lot. But then every time they do, you know, damage to the player, or you do damage to the player with lock, you get to loot, you get to dig for your bombs, you get to get one card closer to that key card that's going to win you the game. Key, pun intended. I'm going to shut up. I'm dragging this out. I apologize. I'm tired, clearly. But Locke is awesome. He's probably my favorite character from Final Fantasy VI, and this card is great. Next up, we've got Omega Heartless Evolution, an 8/8 legendary artifact creature robot for 7 mana in the colors of Simic, and he has the Wave Cannon ability. So when Omega enters, for each opponent, tap up to 1 target non-land permanent that opponent controls, put X stun counters on each of those permanents, and you gain X life, where X is the number of non-basic lands you control. This does a lot. Wow. This does... I mean, it does a lot more in Commander where you have multiple opponents, right? You get to tap down 1 permanent from each opponent and then put a number of stun counters on each of them equal to the number of non-basic lands you control, and then also gain that amount of life, which is just a lot. I think what's cool about this card in particular is the fact that it triggers on enters, and it's not like it doesn't require you to play the card. It's not like if you played Omega, then do this. It just triggers on enters, so you could set up flicker effects to keep reusing the ability. You could use it with the mono blue version of Y'shtola that we saw that flickers double at the end of your turn. You could keep flickering this thing, tapping their stuff down, putting stun counters on it, gaining even more life. The life seems unimportant compared to the other part of the card, but I actually think the life's going to be super important. It means you can swing in with the Omega without being as afraid because you're going to gain back all that life. So they're not really effectively able to race you. They're not able to, like, crack back. So you can sort of swing willy-nilly at the opponent and just try to kill them as soon as possible and not have to worry as much about holding back blockers because you're just gaining a bunch of life. And then, you know, if you do find ways to flicker this slowly over the game, you just end up tapping everything down, putting a million stun counters. That's wishful thinking. I think flickering is probably too cute to really keep in mind for this guy. I think this guy is mainly meant to be a limited bomb, like at the top of your curve, maybe in like the ramp archetype or something like that. But he's pretty cool. Mostly I just love the flavor. I fought this guy. He was a pain in the ass. Wave Cannon was a pain in the ass. And this card seems like a pain in the ass. Next up, we've got Side Quest Hunt the Mark. This is a Final Fantasy XII reference, 100%. This is an enchantment for 2 black and 3. When it enters, you destroy up to 1 target creature. So it's an enchantment that has an ETB that kills something. That's really good. We've already seen cards like this be pretty good in Pixie decks, although they're much cheaper. But those cards don't target the way this one does. So even that alone could be a way to use it. It's probably inefficient, so you probably don't. But it kind of gives me like Ravenous Chupacabra vibes. But there's more. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under an opponent's control this turn, you get to make a treasure token, and if you control 3 or more treasures, you transform the enchantment. So every turn it also makes you a treasure. You kill something when it enters, and then every turn it makes you a treasure if you're killing something. That seems actually super good in like a mono black control deck, even without seeing what the backside is. You could also play this in a deck that specifically uses other cards that generate treasures really easily, just so that you can flip it the very turn you play it, right? If you've already got a bunch of treasures out, you play this on 5, kill something, and then at the end of your turn, you immediately flip it. Let's see what it becomes. Yzmat Ultimate Mark. Is it Yzmat? I never fought this guy. Maybe I did fight this guy. It's been so long since I've played 12. It was literally when it first came out. I picked it up on launch day, and I played it for like a month, and I haven't touched it since. I never went back and played like the re-releases or anything like that. I only played it that one time. So I don't remember. I may have fought this guy. I don't remember how to pronounce his name, though. I think it's Yzmat Ultimate Mark. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Maybe the reason I didn't fight it is because I didn't complete all the hunts. I think this might have been like the end-all be-all hunt at the end if you did all of the optional hunts. I don't remember. Let me know in the comments. But this is a 5/6 legendary dragon, and it has the ability to pay 1 black and 1, sacrifice another creature or artifact, and it gains indestructible until end of turn, but you have to tap it. This is actually kind of interesting. This might be a really good inclusion for like a mono black control deck, because you can be very creature light, use this as removal, potentially even have ways to flicker it to remove more things, but generate treasures every turn to help pay for your more expensive control cards. Eventually flip it, and it becomes this dude that even if you don't have creatures, if you're in an almost purely control build, but you have a bunch of artifacts you're playing, stuff like Tithing Blade, stuff like the bauble that we got, that's the 1-drop that gives -2/-2, you could have ways to sack board presence that isn't really worth a lot to you, just to keep him alive, and then your opponent doesn't really want to use removal on him because it doesn't actually kill him. You could just use him as a win condition. At the end of the day, I worry it might be a little too expensive to make the cut in Standard, but I think there's some potential there. I think we should definitely explore it. Zodiark, the new god that's like 5 black mana, just seems perfect for mono black control decks, and I really want to try to bring that deck back in Standard in a big way. This card could be a part of that. It could be too expensive and too cute. At the very least, I think it's going to be amazing in Limited. It's an uncommon. You definitely snag this. 5 mana, kill anything, get extra value, and eventually become a win condition is stupid good in Limited. So grab this. Don't let it pass. It will not come back to you. It will not table. The card's just great in Limited, and I really do think it has at least a chance to make a cut, to make the cut in some kind of a control shell. But next up, we've got Ignis Scientia. Or is it Scientia? I don't know if that last name was ever pronounced. I didn't play all of the DLCs for 15. I finished the base game of 15 back when it first came out, but I did not play all of the DLCs. I think I played like 1 or 2 of them. I don't remember if this guy's last name was ever pronounced. Ignis Scientia, a 2/2 legendary human advisor for 3 mana in the colors of Simic. When he enters, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So 2/2, that fetches you a land and puts it on the battlefield tapped. Granted, you don't get to search for anything, so it doesn't help color fix very well, but it definitely helps ramp well. And then it also has the ability, I've come up with a new recipe. For 3 mana in the colors of Simic, you tap him, you exile target card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, create a food token. That's pretty interesting. I think this guy is good enough just in like ramp decks, and I mean, not necessarily in Standard. Is this guy good enough for Standard? A 2/2 body for 3 mana that puts a land onto the battlefield and doesn't make you have to have it in your hand to do it, so you're not using up any card advantage, could be good enough. But I have a feeling with just how powerful Standard is right now, the power creep right now, I don't think this guy makes the cut. In Limited, he's going to be really fun, especially if there's a ramp deck, a ramp kind of archetype. But this other ability is just interesting to me. Like, having access to incidental graveyard removal is pretty good these days because there's just so much value coming out of the graveyard. And I don't know how important those food tokens are going to be, but even just to fuel cards like the side quest Hunt the Mark that turns into Yasmat, like, you could sacrifice the foods to keep this guy alive with Indestructible. It really depends how many different ways you can get value out of those food tokens in the Limited format specifically, because I do think this card is mainly made for Limited. But I don't know. Maybe there's a world in which it sees play in Standard. If you have ideas about what kind of deck this could fit into, let me know in the comments. Next up, we've got Prompto Argentum, one of the other boy band boys, a 2/2 legendary human scout with haste for 1 red and 1. And he has the selfie shot ability, so whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, you create a treasure token. That's interesting. I mean, a 2/2 haste for 2 that just creates treasure tokens for free sometimes if you cast the right spells, honestly kind of seems okay. They do have to be non-creature spells, which is a little bit at odds with this being like a low-to-the-ground, aggressive, hasty creature. How many decks want to run those kinds of creatures and also have really expensive non-creature spells? And it's also worth noting that even though summons are sagas, they still count as creatures. They're creature sagas, so they're not going to trigger things that trigger off non-creature spells like this selfie shot. Because normally that would be my go-to with stuff like that. Is like, oh, you don't necessarily have to use instants and sorceries. You could use your sagas to trigger it. You can't do that with the summons. So I don't know where this guy wants to be, really. He seems kind of interesting. There's probably some kind of a Limited archetype that wants to make use of him. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you think there's a specific place this guy belongs. Next up, we've got Reach the Horizon, a sorcery for 1 green and 3. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or town cards with different names, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. When I first started reading this, I was thinking 4 mana is too much. That's 1 mana too much for what this card is doing. But then I realized that you can find towns, and maybe that ends up mattering. We did see some interesting town payoff in this video, even with the guy that can draw you 3 cards. And we're just continuing to get cards that have town payoffs. It's possible that if we get town payoffs that are good enough, just being able to put 2 towns into play for 4 mana straight from your deck and trigger all of those town synergies, not to mention trigger the landfall synergies that are coming with like Chocobos and Tifa and some of the other cards we've seen, that could end up being good enough. At the very least, I think in Limited, this is a card that's meant to line up with like some kind of a Chocobo Tifa type landfall archetype. And I think you could do a lot worse than something like this in Limited, considering that you have all of those triggers. You have things that get value off of landfall, you have things that get value off of towns, and you can utilize both of those payoffs in the same deck with a card like this. So I do think in Limited, even though it looks a little overcosted on the surface, if you really think about everything else that's in the set and the ways in which this card can interact with those cards, I think it makes sense. My real question is Standard. Like, I think this being playable in Standard honestly comes down to how good the town cards are. And that honestly comes down to how good are the other town payoff cards that you can use. And we don't know yet. We won't know until we see the entire set spoiled. But there's at least potential for a card like this if the town payoffs end up being good enough. If they end up being as good as, you know, Guildgate payoffs that we've gotten in the past, you could really be looking at a pretty nuts deck. But next up, we've got the Gold Saucer. This is the one I've been waiting for, guys. A land town that taps for a colorless mana, but it does enter untapped, which is important to note. You can pay 2 mana, tap it, flip a coin. If you win, create a treasure token. You can also pay 3, tap it, sacrifice 2 artifacts to draw a card. I kind of love this. Even without the flip a coin, get a treasure part of it, just having a way to sacrifice incidental artifacts that maybe you don't need to draw extra cards later in the game, I kind of love. And it's important to remember that it seems like Wizards of the Coast is pushing towards colorless decks being a thing in Standard in the future. I don't think we're quite there yet, but this set is obviously taking steps towards getting there. We got Ugin in the last set. In this set, we're getting Bahamut, we're getting Ultima, we're getting the Gold Saucer here. So there are definitely cards that are moving in that direction. And I think when we finally get there, when there is a real, consistent, competitive colorless deck, the Gold Saucer will be almost an auto-include, I think, as a 4-of in those decks. If you don't need any colored mana whatsoever, and you're potentially tapping this for double mana sometimes if you have the new Ultima card out, but then just able to use this with all of the artifacts that you're playing to get extra value later on, I think that could be really, really good. If that deck ends up existing later on with more colorless cards coming out in future sets, you're not really going to care about not making colored mana in your mana base, and you're going to want the best utility lands as your mana base for that deck, and this is a really good example of that. So I think it's one of those cards that maybe isn't going to be super relevant right now, but with the direction that Wizards seems to be going, I have a feeling it will end up being super relevant later on, and that's exciting to me. The flip a coin thing's cool. It works with the new Edgar card that we saw recently, so that you can make sure that your flips coming up heads, if you have Edgar out, this is basically just reads pay 2, tap, create a treasure token, which is also kind of cool when you consider the fact that it's just kind of extra on already having the ability to draw cards off of sacking artifacts. So I love everything that this is doing. Not as powerful as I would like the Gold Saucer to be, but I mean, I guess I would kind of have that opinion about all of my favorite things from Final Fantasy, and they gotta balance it, right? So I guess it makes sense for an uncommon Gold Saucer to be this, and I do think in the future it'll end up being relevant in some way. Next up, we've got our first rare of the day. This is the Lunar Whale. The Lunar Whale? Lunar was a good series too. Silver Star Story and Eternal Blue. Those were good games. I remember getting the collector's edition when it came out on PlayStation. PlayStation 1. I'm old. This is a 3/5 legendary artifact vehicle with flying for 1 blue and 3. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. As long as the Lunar Whale attacked this turn, you may play the top card of your library, and it crews for 1. I actually really, really like this. I really, really like this card. Getting a valuable board presence, piece of board presence in the form of a 3/5 flying vehicle, you know, that crews for so little, and that also gives you the potential to turn on the ability to play the top card of your library. I think what I like the most about this card is the fact that it's not just a creature all the time. Most of the time when we get a creature with this kind of ability, your opponent can just kill it right away and get rid of all of that potential value that you could have got with it. You usually don't actually get to use it to play things from the top, you just use it as a removal magnet, right? But with this thing, it's not a creature until you want to play stuff. You're looking at the top card no matter what, but you only get to play that top card if you attacked with the Lunar Whale. And it has flying, so it's going to be a lot easier to swing in and not necessarily get it killed by whatever could block it, because it's swinging in the air with evasion, and they're less likely to have a blocker, which is nice. But what's great about this is you just wait until you have something on the top that you want to play, and then you crew it and swing. So you're not leaving up the opportunity for your opponent to just kill this whenever they want. You keep it safe until you're ready to play something, and then you swing, and then you play the thing. And depending on what's on the top, you might even be able to play it in response to removal that they might have in their hand, which is also pretty interesting. So I think this is one of those cards that's a lot better than it looks on the surface. It's still not like insanely good, but I think it's probably one of the better cards we've seen that lets you play stuff from the top. And it's worth noting too, it's not just the very top card. It's as long as it attacked this turn, you can play the top card of your library for the rest of the turn. So you can just keep playing. So it's possible you could play this in a combo deck where you get it out early and you kind of set yourself up. You dodge their removal by not turning it into a creature, and then you wait for them to tap out, And then when they're tapped out and they can't kill this thing at instant speed, you crew it, turn it into a creature, swing, and then just start to chain off the top with whatever combo you have set up. I can't think of a particular one on the top of my head, but there are plenty of ways to combo through your deck, playing things for free off the top and that sort of thing. So maybe this could contribute to a deck like that. I think it's a really cool card. Let me know how you feel about it in the comments. Next up, we've got the Regalia, another vehicle. This one's a 4/4 haste legendary artifact vehicle for 4 colorless mana. It crews for only 1, which is really, really nice. And whenever it attacks, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. What an interesting card. I don't hate it, but it's definitely underwhelming, right? Especially considering the fact that it's legendary. And flavor-wise, it makes sense that it's legendary. There's only one Regalia in Final Fantasy 15. But functionality, I guess you what? You play it on 4, you immediately crew it with your worst creature, swing in, ramp a land. And like, if they trade with it, you still ramped a land, and they lost something that's probably of equal mana value if it was able to trade with a 4/4. And if they don't trade with it, well, now they have to kill the thing, or trade with it eventually, or you just keep ramping a land every single turn. I think this is actually better than it looks. I think in practice, this is going to be interesting. Playing this alongside like the World Wagon and the Green Overlord and stuff in some kind of weird vehicle ramp deck could be awesome. I don't know. You can trigger all of your landfall triggers with this. That's another thing to keep in mind. I have a feeling this card's going to be way better than it looks. On first inspection, it looks like it's not enough for what you're paying. It's legendary, and it's just a 4/4 for 4, and all it does is ramp a land. But like, the more you start to think about it, like, there are so many landfall payoffs. I could see some crazy landfall deck with chocobos with a bunch of different payoffs for landfall, and then you just slam this, crew it with your worst chocobo, swing with everything, get another landfall trigger on all of your dudes, and like just kind of like go ham. I don't know. I feel like this could be really good. It feels a little bit like the Green Overlord. It costs 1 more mana than that card does if you play it with the counters on it, the impending counters, but it costs 1 less mana than playing that as the full creature, and has the body, and most importantly also has haste. So even though it doesn't have an enters trigger like the Green Overlord, you can use the attack trigger the turn you play it, and it almost feels like an enters trigger. I have a feeling this card's going to actually be really good. It's easy to kill, right? I think that's the one downside. But I think in the right decks that can take advantage of those land drops, I actually think this will be really good. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this card. Next up, we've got Tellah, Great Sage, a 3/3 legendary human wizard for 5 mana in the colors of Izzet. This is from Final Fantasy IV. This is like the main dude, wizard dude in Final Fantasy IV, like the big mage from that game. I guess technically a sage, but whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, and if 4 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, you draw 2 cards. If 8 or more mana was spent to cast that spell, you sacrifice Tellah, and it deals that much damage to each opponent. What a crazy card, man. On the one side, sacrificing him seems like a bummer, because you lose access to being able to create 1/1 tokens and being able to draw cards off the stuff that you're playing. But with it being legendary, that just means you can justify having 4 copies, and eventually you play something really huge that's 8 or more mana, sacrifice this, do 8 or more damage to your opponent, and then just play your second copy of Tellah. Or you could also play this with Reanimator cards, where you're specifically sacrificing Tellah, doing a whole bunch of damage, and then bringing him right back out of the grave. That could be kind of cool. I think all of that is just extra, though. The fact that you could just fire off a bunch of cheap non-creature spells and make a bunch of 1/1 tokens, and then the fact that, you know, if you cast 4 mana spells or more, you get to draw cards is also really, really good. I don't know exactly what this wants to be in. It's really, really interesting. I think 5 mana is too much if you're not utilizing the 4 or more mana to cast a spell part of the card. Because then it's just like a worse version of, like, was it Monastery Mentor, I think, that spit out tokens? Those tokens have prowess, and that card only costs 3. Yeah, I think you definitely want to play more expensive spells with him. The fact that you can make 1/1 tokens off of playing every non-creature spell should be considered sort of gravy. Just extra value that pushes him even harder. But I think if you're building a deck with him, it needs to be built around the idea of using spells that cost 4 or more mana. And every single one of those spells is also double cantripping when you play it. And when you think about it like that, it's kind of nuts. Every 4 cost or more spell also draws you 2 cards. Every single one. I could see a world where maybe you have a lot of flashback cards, because you can play cheap stuff early, make a bunch of 1/1s, but then you can flash it back from the graveyard for more expensive costs that's 4 or more, and draw extra cards off of it as well. That might be the way he's intended to be used. I don't know. Let me know in the comments how you feel about Tellah and where you think he would best be used. But there's absolutely a ton of potential in this card. A lot of value if you can put the right cards with him and, you know, build the right deck around him. I think he's super cool. The flavor is spot on for his character in Final Fantasy IV, so I'm kind of loving that. But let me know in the comments how you'd build him. Next up, we have our first mythic of the day. This is A tier and Pre-Win, a legendary artifact equipment for 6 colorless mana. This comes from Final Fantasy XIV. If you guys didn't know, this is like the end-all, be-all sword and shield for the Paladin class in Final Fantasy XIV. I love that game. If you guys haven't played Final Fantasy XIV, I just have to say really quick, that is like the best single-player Final Fantasy we've gotten in decades, which is funny because it's an MMO, so it's supposed to be multiplayer first, but honestly, the best single-player storylines we've gotten in Final Fantasies, you know, since the PS2 era, in my opinion, have come buried inside Final Fantasy XIV as an MMO, and all of the expansions I feel like another game, and they all feel like they're the same quality as like old school Final Fantasy, and for the most part you play them single player anyway. Like if you get to a dungeon, you can group up with people and play the dungeon together, but a lot of the story stuff, the NPC, the discussions, even instanced boss battles and stuff, you have to play solo. So if you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV and you love old school single player Final Fantasies, I definitely recommend you give it a try and jump in, because it took me a long time to try that game out thinking it was just the MMO, and I am so glad I took the plunge, because I think I played that game for like 2,000 hours in 2020 while I was locked down, and it was just nuts, and I loved every second of it. If you've been missing old school Final Fantasy stories, you want to jump in and play that game, even if you never play with another player and you just play it solo. I highly recommend it. But anyway, I'm going off on another tangent because clearly I need coffee and sleep, or sleep and coffee, I don't know. This is a 6 cost legendary artifact equipment that equips for 5. An equipped creature has base power and toughness XX, where X is your life total. This card's nuts. On the surface, it looks like it's a do nothing and a win more card that's just too cute. It's so expensive to play. It is so expensive to equip. It doesn't do anything the turn you play it except sit there and basically give your opponent a free time walk. All of that is terrifying. All of those things have been things that have been signs of a card not being playable in Standard in the past. But the thing that's different about this card is you specifically play it in a life gain deck. And if you're in a life gain deck and the entire deck is built around gaining as much life as you can every single turn, you should have a turn that you can take off where you have a comfortable enough life total where you can just play out a thing that does nothing, maybe take some hits from your opponent, and still be okay. And so the kind of deck this belongs in is a lot more forgiving for a do-nothing like this. And the payoff, if you do end up getting it out, is nuts, because literally any one of your creatures becomes a game-ending threat. If you're in a life gain deck, it's going to be what, like a 40-40 or a 50-50, and they can't kill the creature because you just equip it again. Even if it takes your whole turn to re-equip this, it doesn't matter, right? Having a guy that's that powerful and enough life that you don't even have to worry about swinging with him, and you don't have to worry about holding up blockers because you're just constantly gaining life, I feel like could be nuts. So even though my normal instinct is to say this card is way too cute, way too expensive, way too slow, way too do nothing, blah 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 blah, I could go on and on and on, I feel like because you use it in a life gain deck, and because the value it provides is so extreme, and you have this inevitability when it's on the board where it doesn't matter how many times you kill a creature, it's just gonna keep coming back and being re-equipped. They have to kill the equipment itself. That inevitability just makes this an insane threat, I feel. I could be wrong. But I have a feeling this is the one instance where a card like this that feels like a do-nothing, that's way too expensive, is actually going to end up being nuts. I could definitely see it happening. Life gain decks are already kind of pushed right now, whether or not you're doing like the bat decks or just a more vague sort of life gain deck. I feel like this card has a chance of being crazy, especially because we've seen some other life gain cards pushed in this set, stuff like 𝐴 Yeah, I definitely feel like there's possibility for this card. It could be too expensive. It could be too cute. We're gonna have to try it out. But this is the one time where I would go against my instincts and say, I think this card's gonna be relevant. I think it's gonna be relevant in a big way. Let me know in the comments if you agree. But that brings us to our last mythic of the day, the Ancient Adamantoise. A creature turtle for 3 green and 5, so a whopping 8 mana. It is an 8/20, guys. It has 20 toughness. This is the secret boss that's in Final Fantasy 15. It's just sitting there on the world map. It looks like a mountain, and then, in the end game, you can wake it up and fight it, and it has an insane amount of health, so it makes sense that it has 8 power and 20 toughness. It also has vigilance, which is nuts for something with 20 toughness, and it has ward 3, so it's hard to target with removal. Damage isn't removed from this creature during cleanup steps, though, which is perfectly representative of the way that fight feels in Final Fantasy 15, because you have to fight the thing forever, but you're chipping away at it little by little and eventually getting there. So the fact that damage isn't removed during cleanup steps kind of represents that sort of play style, which is really interesting. All damage that would be dealt to you and other permanents you control is dealt to this creature instead. And when this creature dies, you exile it and make 10 tapped treasure tokens, which also makes sense because when you finally kill this thing, you get crazy rewards. Yeah, this is perfect. I don't know how good it is. I feel like there is a Toughness Matters deck that has been trying to exist in Standard for a while now. We have a few different cards that kind of play into that. There's the dude with the really big butt, the Simic guy, that you can spend blue mana to like draw a bunch of cards. And then there's the other turtle that makes things do damage equal to their toughness. There is some support for an archetype like this. So this could end up existing as a standard archetype, which would be really, really fun. The fact that you can't deal damage to you or any of the other permanents is also kind of crazy. If you could combo this with something that could prevent the damage, give it indestructible, something like that, it could get really cool. Because if they can't deal damage to you and they can't deal damage to your other creatures, and all of that damage is done to this, but then there's something that's protecting this from damage so that it doesn't matter that damage isn't removed during cleanup steps. I don't know. I feel like there could be some kind of a combo deck there. So I could see this guy potentially existing in combo decks. I could see this guy potentially existing in a Toughness Matters deck. I could also see this just being some kind of a weird ramp card where you play it for 8, sacrifice it to make 10 treasure tokens, and use those to go off. So I do think there's a number of ways you could maybe build around this. I don't know if any of them are going to be consistent enough or reliable enough to be like competitive, but there's definitely potential there that I'd like to explore. If you have ideas about how to use this guy or different cards that you'd want to combo with him, definitely let me know in the comments. This is one of the cards today that we've seen that just has the most untapped potential. And I'm excited to just see what you guys come up with for all of the different ways we can maybe take advantage of this card. But that's going to do it for today. We had a ton of cards to get through, so thank you for being patient and checking them out with me. If you haven't already, please like the video. It helps so much more than you could possibly ever understand. And subscribe because we have a ton more content on the way. I am super excited. We're getting towards the tail end of spoiler season, so the last few batches of cards are on their way. And I'm just excited to get to it. I'll let you guys know more info about early access ASAP. And I'll see you tomorrow for more spoilers. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.